So you say wetlands, in other states, what makes Indiana unique? Do other states have a wetland, like a state regulated wetland type inventory, or is Indiana kind of its own little deal?
Right. It's interesting that you bring that up. So, the regulations around wetlands are different from state to state. There's national wetland, national level regulation on
And
wetlands.
how do you know what is
Right.
nationally regulated, what's state regulated?
It's not easy, and that's part of the problem. There's some legislation that's being proposed here in Indiana that's gotten a lot of attention recently, and it would do away with the state's wetland regulation, which is actually very unique. And I'll get to your question about, do other states have regulations like this? The short answer is not very many.
Okay.
I think there's some energy in Indiana, so why don't we act more like these other states and just get rid of it? And we'll talk about that. But there's no question, first of all, that whether it's federal regulation or state level regulation can be a pain. And it's a hassle in knowing whether this wetland is regulated by the state, whether it's regulated by the feds, whether
We
it's
deal with
regulated
conservation all the time as far as filling that gap, trying to
And I think
paperwork and different things that.
There's no question that the red tape around the process, even when it's working well, is challenging. And so you can understand a desire to just sort of move away from this. But what makes Indiana unique, and even if you just look within the St. Joe Basin, on the Indiana side, so didn't mention that, but better than half the land that's drained into the St. Joe is coming from Michigan.
Right.
And we got our half in northern Indiana here. On the Indiana side, we've lost 72% of our wetlands, whereas on the Michigan side, we've only lost 40. Pretty big difference between the two states. Well, what you find if you look a little further, that 72% actually is pretty good on the Indiana side. Overall, as a state, we've lost closer to 90% of our wetlands. So I think what happened was back in the early 2000s, the state passed its own wetland regulations that went above and beyond what was going on at the federal level. And I think that was in response to this awareness, like we've lost so much and we were suffering from water quality and some flooding problems. And the feds were not at the time, and they certainly are not now, because there's been a lot of changes at the federal level in wetland regulation. And it's beyond a doubt that the feds are not regulating what are called isolated wetlands. They don't have a direct connection to a water body, a creek or a stream or a drain that would clearly be considered water.
So this is my wetlands and my streams over here.
Yes, if it's not touching it,
okay.
It's probably not regulated by the feds. So Indiana had always said, look, we've lost so much, we realize that each one of these wetlands is important. And there was a threshold. It had to be bigger than about a quarter acre. I think the minimum one is a tenth of an acre for a certain kind of wetland. But generally, it's got to be a quarter or half acre before you'd have to worry about any regulation. But even if it's not connected to the waters of the U.S., we're going to regulate it here because we're kind of in the red zone in terms of what storage we've got left out there in the landscape. And that's really, whether you're talking ag BMPs that we want to do, our stormwater stuff that we're doing in the city, we're trying to build in some storage to make up for some of what we've lost out there.
It's a retention area.
Exactly.
Everybody has to put up, build a retention area.
And that requires oversight and regulation. As soon as you're going to do that, as soon as you're going to require mitigation, now you've got someone else being involved, someone else you got to go check with, someone else you got to get to sign off on something, and there's hassle around that. And so I think what the commission and several of our members, including the stormwater conservation districts, have concerns about this legislation that's being proposed to do away with Indiana state wetland regulations because we feel like it might be one of these throwing out the baby with the bathwater sort of thing, that really we understand there's some issues with it, but let's fix it. Let's see how we can get this right, not just get rid of the thing altogether, because we're running out of places to put water. And that's whether you're talking in the urban environment or with our ag BMPs, we're trying to find places to store water so it doesn't end up on us, whether it's, in the city of Elkhart, city of Goshen, South Bend where I live. We're getting a lot more water in town than we used to get, and that has to do with things that are happening upstream. And we want it to be reasonable, whatever kind of oversight, but there needs to be some way to make sure we keep that balance sheet even. So when we lose some storage, we're making some up somewhere else.
Right. No. When you figure it was 3 years ago coming up, we had a major event.
Oh man.
When we saw the waters coming
Exactly.
in, and if we wouldn't have had certain BMPs put in place, it would have been far worse.
No question.
So,
Yeah, we're seeing volumes coming through the St. Joe that are unprecedented. We have no record, and we've been keeping records. The gauge on the St. Joe down in the house has been there since the 40s, I think, and
okay,
never seen that kind of water coming
right,
past it.
right.
We want to do what we can in the district, soil and water district, and the efforts of the commission to try and build in new storage. But at this point, we're kind of in the St. Joe, when you look at it relative to other rivers in the state of Indiana, we're doing pretty good. We're pretty healthy, and that has a lot to do with the fact that we haven't lost the kind of wetlands across the whole basin. We're only at 40%.
Right.
That's a lot better than other places in Indiana. And so what we're saying is, look, we want to protect what's good here too. It's not just about fixing what's broken.
Right.
We want to protect what we've got that's good, and there's not really a way to do wetland regulation at the local level. So this is something that falls on the state level or at the federal level, and that's where we really need to see some guidance and some protection.